Back in the 90s, Honda was doing everything they could to make the Acura brand successful. In comes the 1992 to 1994 Acura Vigor. Now in other markets it was sold as a Honda Vigor and then later as a Honda Inspire. But they wanted to make something a little bit special for the North American market, despite the fact that it really is just a Honda Accord. Now this car is also very special to us, which is why we're filming it even though it really isn't in the showroom condition we usually like to have cars in. Our spotlight is on this 1992 Acura Vigor LS. We're going to be showing you everything about this car, taking it for a drive, and going over what you need to know if you are in the market for a car that you probably won't find to buy.
My Poppa bought this car certified pre-owned from Acura in 1995, and it's been in our family ever since. This is again the reason why we're featuring this specific car in its current condition. The Vigor will likely be going to the wreckers in a couple months. Throughout the 2000s, the car had relatively few miles and was only being driven for a week at a time every month. When I was 18 and ready to buy my first car, I was really hoping to take possession of the Vigor, as it was a car I always wanted to drive but was never allowed to. Honda wanted to fill the gap between the Legend and Integra in their newly created Acura luxury brand. Stiff competition from Lexus pushed Honda to bring the Honda Inspire and the luxury-oriented Honda Vigor to the American market. The Lexus ES 300 was the direct competitor with the Acura Vigor, both being front-wheel drive, midsize, entry luxury cars. However, the Vigor opted to be the sporty alternative. That sport design continued on the interior, which created an almost unusable back seat and front seats that sat very low, making it difficult for most drivers to really fit in. The front end has a relatively unique headlight system, with the daytime running lights in the center, headlights on the outside, and fog lights on the inside. The frameless windows were unique for a Honda sedan at the time, but could be found on the competing Lexus ES from 1989 until 2001. The successor to the Vigor, the Acura TL, also included frameless windows for its first generation. There's not much excitement happening out back. Hyundai obviously copied Acura's homework for their current Sonata with the large Vigor lettering on the trunk. Inside the cramped interior, we find the cloth seats and plastic-looking wood trim. If you upgraded to the GS trim, you would have gotten leather seating and a 4-way power driver seat, along with a power moonroof and rear magazine pockets for the non-existent passengers you'd have back there. The driver's door features the central lock switch and power window controls. The main on is the lockout for the rear windows, and the driver's the only window with automatic feature. The door has wood-ish and seat trim along the side with large map pockets and a light at the bottom. To the left of the steering wheel are the power mirror controls and instrument cluster brightness. Just below the gauge cluster are the buttons for the front fog lights and cruise control. The gauge cluster is functional with a large tachometer and speedometer, along with warning lights along the top and side. Maintenance required indicator can be reset with a simple press of the button below it. The steering wheel features 2 horn buttons on either side of the airbag and the cruise control buttons on the right side. To the right of the steering wheel is the rear window defrost and hazard switch and clock. The center console is pretty basic, with 2 heat vents beside the clock, the air conditioning levers below, and an upgraded stereo below that. A CD player was one of the only options available for the car. Further below we find the ashtray and cigarette lighter. The transmission is described as being electronically controlled with programmed lock-up torque converter. It's very fancy. A coin tray is found beside the handbrake, and the center armrest opens up for storage. The glove box is average, and for the 94 model year, a passenger side airbag was standard. Along the passenger's door is also the central lock and power window switch. The aforementioned rear seats are truly useless. We pushed the front ones up all the way just to film these clips, and it still wasn't enough room for us to get back there. The door features those frameless windows, along with the window switch beside the door handle. There are no other features in the back seats. So let's start that 5-cylinder engine up and go on probably one of the most interesting test drives we'll ever go on.
Despite this car being 25 years old, and as we mentioned in the introduction, it really is on the last leg of its life, it still drives very well. The engine still has quite a bit of power, and even the steering, you point it where you want to go and it'll go. It doesn't feel loose at all. The power steering is quite good. And we give it a little gas here. It gets up to speed pretty quick. I gotta say that, the one thing you'll never be disappointed with when it comes to a Honda is its sort of engine dependability. Performance maybe not so much, but even on this, for the size, considering it's not a V6, it certainly does go when you want it to. I don't know, I think that's not bad for a 25-year-old car. Interior visibility is amazing, just like we find on any car that we're filming pre-2002. The mirror is relatively big. You can see out the back window, no problem. The windows here are nice and large to look around. The mirrors are relatively functional as well. So overall, you've got good visibility in a vehicle like this, so that if you are kind of ripping it around a little bit, you don't have to worry about, you know, not seeing somebody around a corner or backing into somebody as you're pulling into a spot. It is fun, I gotta say. You know, there's a lot of cars that we feature on Test Drive, and I always say, you know, you gotta try, you gotta see how it feels. But you know, I think that the Acura Vigor is just one of those cars that not only do you might not even know it existed in the first place, but there's gonna be so few of them left, both because nobody bought them, and those that did buy them, they're all destroyed by this point. So you don't really get an opportunity to try it at this point. But if you find one, if you're in California, you're in Florida, you're in an area that has no rust, and you're looking on your local Auto Trader classified site, and you find an Acura Vigor, I think you got to take it. At least take it for a drive. Maybe not buy it, but at least take it for a drive and see how it feels. Because they, you know, Honda's definitely not making a car like this anymore, and it's a little special. You know, special for us too. Right? We've had this car in the family, as I mentioned in the introduction. We've had it for about 20 years, so I am very familiar with this car. And I love driving it. Like, it is a very enjoyable car to drive, despite the fact that you're really, you know, there is no seat. You're sitting on the floor. Legroom is terrible. Rear seats are non-functional whatsoever. You know, despite all these negative things, the Acura Vigor is still quite a remarkable car, and one that doesn't deserve to be forgotten by history. I think that if there is a Vigor out there in mint condition, no rust, and relatively original, that person needs to save it. It's your job as a good car enthusiast citizen to not destroy that car and to let it last, so that somebody will have it for the future.
In all honesty, you probably won't find one of these cars for sale, and if you already own one, then you know what the common problems are. The front ends on these cars need to be replaced every 3 years or so, which is basically the steering components and suspension. The engine itself seems to be pretty reliable, using Honda's single overhead cam non-VTEC engine known as the G25A1 for North America, the only inline 5 engine Honda ever produced. The 4-speed automatic transmission hasn't given us any problems for driving 254,000 kilometers, and I imagine the 5-speed manual would be about the same. Rust is easily the biggest issue for these cars if you live anywhere remotely wet. We purposely filmed a limited amount of exterior shots for this car due to its incurable rust, and you can see that from the wheel wells and the rear trunk, which are the worst spots for it to develop. The only non-engine related repair that was done to this car was the fuel tank. It started leaking about 5 years ago, and OEM and aftermarket parts are next to impossible to find for this car. Acura no longer makes parts for the Vigor, and aftermarket suppliers have abandoned the model. For a car that was only produced for 3 years in North America, the Acura Vigor is likely to be one of the least common average cars on the market today. With very little changes throughout the 3 years, there doesn't seem to be a model worth getting over any of the others, unless you want that passenger side airbag and in-dash CD player which became standard on the GS for 1994. Here's the deal. Do you have an Acura Vigor? Tell us about it in the comments, or even send us an email about it directly to me at niall@perpetualradio.ca. I'm curious to see how many of them still exist and who's holding on to them. This channel has grown exponentially over the past year, but we're still tens of thousands of subscribers away from being able to buy a car specifically for this channel to feature. But I want that car to be an Acura Vigor. I want to be that person that has a mint condition OEM Vigor sitting in our test drive garage, ready to show off at local car shows and cover extensively on this channel. Hopefully one day, for my Poppa. Thanks for watching this very special episode of Test Drive Spotlight on the 1992 Acura Vigor. If you have any questions about this car, please leave a comment below and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already.